They thought they could humiliate me, destroy my livelihood, and hide behind HOA rules, but they forgot one thing: when the snow falls, I'm the only reason their road exists. What happened next shut down an entire neighborhood, exposed corruption, and turned their parking violation into the most expensive mistake of their lives. If you love real-world karma, slow burn revenge, and stories where arrogance meets reality, hit subscribe now, because this one escalates fast. The first thing you need to understand is that I wasn't just some guy with a snowplow. I was the guy every emergency dispatcher, school bus driver, and ambulance crew in that valley quietly depended on when winter came down hard, because the road that led to the gated Silver Pines HOA wasn't owned by the county, wasn't serviced by the city, and sure as hell wasn't plowed by the state. It was a private access road carved through a frozen stretch of land that iced over faster than anything else in the area, and for 15 straight winters, I was the only contractor willing to take it on, which is why it still amazes me how casually the HOA board decided to make me their enemy over something as small and petty as a parking violation. It started on a Tuesday night after a 14-hour plowing shift when I pulled my orange snowplow truck into my own driveway, the only wide spot near the road where my rig could safely sit without blocking traffic, and I went inside to eat dinner with my wife, thinking nothing of it, only to wake up the next morning to a bright orange violation notice slapped on my windshield claiming I had parked a commercial vehicle in a restricted zone, which was ridiculous because the restriction applied only to overnight street parking inside the gated community, not private driveways outside it. But when I called the HOA office, the woman on the phone spoke to me like I was a child who'd tracked mud onto her carpet, telling me rules were rules and fines would accrue daily unless the vehicle was removed. So I removed it, temporarily, to finish another plowing job, thinking that would be the end of it, except it wasn't, because 2 days later, while I was clearing an emergency route for a rural clinic, I got a call from a neighbor saying something was wrong at my place, and when I raced back, heart pounding, I found my snowplow parked crooked in the snow, windshield shattered, front grille crushed inward, plow blade bent like a broken jaw, and smoke curling from under the hood as if the machine itself was struggling to breathe, and standing nearby were 2 HOA board members, clipboards in hand, with that smug, self-righteous calm people get when they think authority protects them from consequences, and they told me, without blinking, that my truck had been impounded for repeated violations and disabled for safety reasons, using a private towing contractor who clearly had no idea how to handle heavy equipment. And when I asked who authorized this, the board president smiled and said the HOA did, citing a clause buried in their bylaws that allowed enforcement actions on non-compliant vehicles posing a nuisance. And I realized in that moment this wasn't about parking at all, it was about power, because I'd argued with them months earlier when they tried to lowball me on my plowing contract, insisting I cut my rates despite rising fuel costs, and I'd refused, calmly, professionally, which apparently had bruised some egos. So now they were sending a message, but what they didn't realize, what they couldn't see past their tidy spreadsheets and enforcement letters, was that my snowplow wasn't just my livelihood, it was their lifeline. And winter doesn't negotiate, it doesn't care about HOA authority, and it certainly doesn't care about pride. So while they strutted back to their warm homes thinking they'd taught me a lesson, I stood in the snow staring at my wrecked truck, knowing repairs would take days, maybe weeks, and then I made the call that changed everything. I phoned the county and formally withdrew my services from Silver Pines effective immediately, citing safety concerns and property damage, which was entirely legal because my contract required operable equipment and mutual good faith. And once that paperwork was filed, I was under no obligation, moral or contractual, to touch their road again. And that same night, the storm hit harder than any forecast predicted, dumping inches per hour, winds screaming like sirens, temperatures plunging so fast the snow turned to ice before it even settled. And while I sat at home watching the weather radar with a mug of coffee and a calm I hadn't felt since the confrontation, the Silver Pines residents were discovering what happens when the one road in and out of your gated paradise becomes a frozen chokehold, because by midnight, cars were stuck sideways, a delivery truck jackknifed at the bend, and by morning, not a single vehicle could get through, which might have been inconvenient but manageable if it weren't for the fact that an elderly resident needed dialysis, a pregnant woman went into early labor, and the school buses couldn't reach the kids, and suddenly the HOA board phones were ringing non-stop, first with complaints, then panic, then outright desperation, and around 7 a.m., my phone rang too, the board president's voice no longer smug but tight and strained, asking, no, begging, me to come clear the road, promising to sort out the misunderstanding later. And I told him, calmly, that my equipment was damaged by unauthorized enforcement action and I was currently unable to provide service, which was the truth, and when he snapped that people could get hurt, I reminded him that I had warned the board months ago that retaliation would have consequences, and then I hung up. And here's where the twist comes in, because while they were scrambling, the county got involved. Emergency services tried to access the road, failed, and opened an investigation into why a private HOA had disabled essential infrastructure without coordination, and by the time my truck was being repaired, paid for, ironically, by the towing company's insurance after it came out they'd been misled about their authority, the HOA was facing fines, lawsuits, and a full audit. Residents were demanding resignations, and emails surfaced showing the board had deliberately targeted me to set an example, which only made things worse. And when the dust settled and the snow finally melted, the board president resigned in disgrace, 2 members were removed by vote, and a new board approached me not with demands but with apologies and a revised contract at my original rate plus a premium for emergency priority, which I accepted, not out of kindness, but because fairness had finally replaced arrogance. And now, every winter when I clear that road, I see the same houses, the same gates, but very different faces watching from behind their windows, because they learned a lesson no bylaw can erase. You can weaponize rules against people all you want, but if you forget who actually keeps the road beneath your feet, winter will remind you, brutally and without mercy.